Thank you again for being here. I'm Sarah Ballard with South Carolina Women in Leadership, and this is getting your elected representatives' attention. So we're really excited about sharing this information today. And we will send out an email this afternoon with the presenter's contact information, with a link to the replay of the session, links to the slide presentations, and also links to other resources that will be helpful in contacting your representatives. And we're going to have 3 parts today. We're going to have some general information about elected representatives, both at the federal and state and local level from All In Together. Then we'll be talking more specifically about South Carolina and about redistricting in South Carolina. And then Representative Spencer Whetmore is going to join us. She's with us already, but she's going to talk a little bit from her perspective as a representative about how she likes to get information from constituents and how she prioritizes and gets back to people, those kind of things. And then we will have time for a Q&A at the end. And if you can, because we do have such a full agenda, we'd really like you to save your questions for the end. You're welcome to put them in the chat. I will go back to them later, or if you just want to jot them down and bring them up at the end, that would be great. So again, we encourage you to use the chat throughout the workshop, certainly to share ideas and make comments, and you can send it to everyone or you can send it to an individual participant. And before we get started, I also want to mention that the workshop is made possible with the support of Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina and the Susan D. Boyd Pathways to Leadership Fund. So thank you again for being here. And I'm going to quickly introduce our presenters, and then we're going to launch right in so we can get through all of our information. Elizabeth Stribling is the Research and Special Projects Coordinator with South Carolina Women in Leadership. She's going to do the second part of the presentation. Elizabeth, maybe if you want to give everyone a wave.
Hello,
we're really excited to hear from her. And then we also have Guadalupe. Oh, please go ahead.
Thank y'all so much for being here. Looking forward to share some info with you.
Great. And then Guadalupe Gonzalez, the Community Engagement Manager with All In Together, and Erin Varenko, the Programs and Communications Assistant with All In Together, are going to do the first part of our presentation today. Erin's going to kick us off, so I'm going to go ahead and let her launch right in. Erin, are you able to share your screen with your slide deck?
Yes, I am. Are you seeing it now?
Perfect. Good. Yeah, I can see it. Let us know in the chat if you can see the presentation. And Erin, I'm going to let you take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Sarah. So as Sarah mentioned, my name is Erin, and today we're going to be talking about contacting your elected representatives and how to engage with local, state, and federal government. So first, we'll do some introductions. Then we'll talk about who represents you, and we'll cover the 3 levels of government, the federal, state, and local governments. And then we'll talk about how to contact your elected officials. So how to identify the issue you want to talk about, how to develop your ask, and finally, how to contact them through what method and taking action. So today's workshop is a partnership between All In Together and South Carolina Women in Leadership. All In Together is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that works to equip underserved women with nonpartisan civic education. And South Carolina Women in Leadership is a multi-partisan group whose mission it is to move South Carolina forward. And this, you can join the conversation with us at All In Together and South Carolina Women in Leadership through social media, or you can always send us an email. And today's workshop is part of All In Together's Community Leadership Program, which we launched in 2017. And this program is aimed at closing the gender gap in civic leadership to equip women to become civic leaders in their communities. So let's get started. As I mentioned, my name is Erin, and I'm a Program and Communications Assistant at All In Together. And I'm joined by my colleague, Guadalupe Gonzalez, who's the Community Engagement Volunteer. And we have our email addresses here, so if you have any questions afterwards, always feel free to send us an email. So some community agreements before we get started. We ask that if you're able to, you have your video on so you can engage with the presentation. And as Sarah mentioned, please mute yourself if you're not talking. And then throughout the presentation, we're asking you to be curious, open, and respectful in order to cultivate a brave space where we're encouraging dialogue and recognizing differences between us. Please take care of yourself during the session. So if you need to get up to use the restroom or get something to drink, please do so. And as Sarah mentioned as well, we're going to be recording this session and you'll have access to all the presentation materials afterwards. Okay, so 2020 and 2021 have certainly been challenging years for our communities, but we are not isolated. And our goal today is to give you the tools and information you need in order to identify the issues in your community and create sustainable change. So let's start by defining civic engagement. Civic engagement is any action that allows us access to political power and to influence political decision-making. And oftentimes when we think of civic engagement, we think of voting and running for office, but it could also be a variety of other things, such as writing an op-ed, participating in a town hall, participating in the census, etc. And today we're going to focus on one type of civic engagement, which is contacting your elected officials. So first, it's important to know who represents you. There are 3 levels of representation. There's the federal government, the state government, and the local government. In the federal government, you're directly represented by the president and the Congress. As you probably know, there are 100 senators and 435 US House of Representatives members in the Congress. There are 2 senators per state, and the number of House members is determined by the state's share of the US population. So in South Carolina, for example, you have 2 senators, Lindsey Graham and Tim Scott, and you have 7 House members. Some powers that the Federation have are to declare war, raise and maintain armed forces, make treaties and conduct foreign policies, and regulate interstate and foreign commerce, among a few other things. So these are examples of powers of the Federation. So if you were to be contacting your elected official about one of these issues, you would want to be contacting an elected official from the federal government. Now in the state includes an executive branch and a legislative branch. You are directly represented in the legislative branch by the House of Representatives member and 2 senators, and you're represented by the executive branch by the governor, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, and the secretary of state. So most state legislatures, including South Carolina, have a House and Senate just like Congress, but they're laid out in state constitutions and may be unique to each state. Some powers that the states have include conducting elections, establishing welfare programs, regulating business, and enforcing public safety. So these are some examples of reasons that you would be contacting your state representatives. You also have the governor as part of your state legislature. The governor is the chief executive of the state and is elected every 4 years. So the current governor of South Carolina is Governor Henry Dargan McMaster. And these bullet points are some reasons that you might be contacting the governor of South Carolina. So if he has a bill in front of his desk that he's going to sign or veto, if there's a special session being convened by the legislature for specific purposes, these are some reasons why you might want to contact the governor of South Carolina. And then, of course, you have your local government as well. You're directly represented in local government by a mayor and then a city or a town council. In the local government, you might also vote for judges, prosecutors, and county clerks. And local governments often share responsibilities with the state. Some examples of the powers of local government are to maintain jails, collect taxes, oversee police and fire departments, and lead community initiatives. Something that comes up a lot is initiatives to prevent homelessness, decrease unemployment, and make neighborhoods safer. So before you contact your elected representatives, it's important to do your research. We're going to go over in the presentation how to find your federal and local representatives in South Carolina. Here are a few of them listed on this slide. And again, Elizabeth will be showing you how to find them specifically, but it's important to do your research to know who you want to contact based on your issue. So first, we should talk about why it's important to contact your elected officials. Here are some reasons why you might be doing so. If you want to ask legislators to vote a certain way on a bill, if you want to ask them to co-sponsor or introduce a bill, or if you want them to assist in drafting a bill language or testifying for or against a bill. You can also contact your legislators to provide information, release statements, or mobilize stakeholders. So we wanted to share this national poll with you, which shows that contacting your elected officials through things like in-person visits, email messages, postal letters, and phone calls have a lot of positive influence over the way a member or senator arrives at his or her decision on an issue. So this graph shows us that, as you can see from the darker orange bar, there's some positive influence, and the lighter orange bar, there's a lot of positive influence over the way that members and senators make their decisions based on input from the public. And remember that every state is a little bit different. So it's important to do your research first and find out what's the most effective way to contact your elected officials in South Carolina. And Elizabeth will be talking a little bit more about that as well, but just keep this in mind as we move forward. Okay, and then this graph shows us how helpful it is for messages from constituents. And we can see from the gray bars here that only 9% and 18% of people respectively share information about the impact the bill would have on a district or state and tell a personal story related to the issue. Yet we can see from the orange bars that these have a lot of help, that this is very, very helpful for legislatures to hear. So it's important that we know not only why it's important to contact our representatives, but also how to do so effectively. So we want to make sure we're calling not just to complain, but that we have a specific ask and we're sharing a personal story behind it. This is really helpful for legislatures to understand how the bill will impact their constituents. Okay, so then we're going to identify the issue that we want to talk to our members of Congress about. You want to have a combination of three things. The first is passion. So ask yourself, for example, what are your voting issues? These are the issues that are make or break for you. You wouldn't be able to support a candidate if he or she didn't back this issue. And think also about what causes or issues you spend your time volunteering for, or you spend money donating to. Then you want to think about your experience or your expertise. So what issues have impacted you personally, and what professional expertise can you bring to the table in order to explain this issue? And what issues you might be able to provide a unique perspective on. And then lastly, you want to consider a sense of urgency. So which of these issues are time sensitive or are currently being debated, or perhaps are not being talked about and you think are important enough that they should be talked about. So for example, if you were concerned about an education policy, you might be a teacher, and then you would have relevant professional expertise about how this education policy impacts the students in the classroom. Or you might be a mother, and you've seen firsthand how this education policy impacts your children. That would be your experience and your expertise. And with the school year coming up, starting again, that would be a sense of urgency behind your ask. So once you have your issue identified, you need to determine which of your representatives, so the state, local, or federal level, can take action on your particular ask. So this is where it's important to familiarize yourself with the different levels of government and what each level of government has the capacity to control. So then we'll develop our ask. It's important to be specific. So before you start, think of the 5 W's: who, what, where, when, and why. This will help your elected official get a clear sense of what you're asking. Remember to be simple and concise. So make sure you're asking your legislature to do something specific, whether you want them to vote on a bill a certain way, or you want them to sponsor an existing bill or introduce a new bill. Make sure you're asking them to do something specific. And then, of course, you want to share the impact of your request. So this is where your passion, expertise come through. How does this bill or this issue directly impact you and your community? And you can share your personal experience with the issue. It's also nice if you're referencing a specific bill to include the bill number in your ask. This way, the member of Congress or the elected representative knows exactly what you're talking about. There are 4 primary ways to contact people: letters and emails, meetings, calls, and social media. So you can choose one way, you can choose multiple ways and combine them. It depends on your capacity and what works for you. So feel free to be creative. And I know that in South Carolina, many members of Congress and many elected officials often use text messages as well. So that can be an effective way to contact your elected officials. And we're going to talk about some South Carolina specifics in a bit as well. So first, let's start with letters and emails. This is a really common way to contact members of Congress. Their offices are set up to receive these letters and log your comments. Generally, you only need 1 page for your letter. Make sure that it's clear and concise enough that it fits on 1 page. If you have additional materials, you can always attach those. But generally speaking, you can be straightforward and clear enough in your ask that you only need 1 page. And we've found that letters are an effective strategy in South Carolina, so this is a very good option for you. Here's an example of a letter. So the author starts out by introducing him or herself as a firefighter and clearly asking the elected official to sponsor a specific bill, the Volunteer Fire Department Grant Program Act. And then the writer goes on to explain the issue at hand, which is that the firefighting team operates on an extremely tight budget, and without a budget, an adequate budget, they will not be able to provide fire suppression services. So you see how the firefighter has identified the issue, referenced the bill number, made a clear ask, and provided his or her credentials as well as a member of the firefighting team. And then the writer closes by again asking the elected official to sponsor the bill. So this is a really good example and something that you can kind of base your letters on. We've found that emails may be less effective than letters and calls or text messages. So that's just something to keep in mind as we move forward. But Elizabeth is going to talk more about this as well and give you some South Carolina specific context. Another way you can contact your elected officials is through social media. Twitter and Facebook are very popular. You can use social media in a variety of ways. You can thank an elected official for taking a requested action. You can ask them to do something, or you can show your opposition to an action that an elected official has taken. Social media is a really useful tool because it allows you to engage with a broader audience. So you're putting public pressure on the elected official and you're creating a dialogue in the community. You'll see from this example, you can also attach photos, articles, or videos, and you can tag other organizations that may want to join the conversation. So in this example, someone has tweeted, "Thank you at the elected official for endorsing this specific bill because it will benefit children and their families by giving them access to quality public spaces and parks." And then they've tagged some other organizations in the community and used the hashtag for better parks. So this way you're creating a public dialogue around the issue of parks in the community, and you're able to engage with a variety of different people, including the elected official. Next, calls. Calls are a very effective strategy in South Carolina and nationally. Their offices have both national and district offices. And the best thing to do is to call the district office where you live. This gets the elected officials' attention because you are a constituent of theirs. And here is where you share your concerns as a constituent and make that specific ask. So here's an example of a sample script. If you want to call your elected representative, you just simply introduce yourself, provide your name and your address, and then make your ask. So say that you'd like to leave a comment for the elected official about a specific problem or policy, and then you can explain the reason that you care about this specific issue, and that's when you bring in your passion, your expertise, and your sense of urgency. And then the staff member will likely record your message and ask if you'd like a response. The last way to contact your elected official is to hold an in-person meeting. This is a great way to do so because it leaves a long-lasting impression on your elected representative and has an immediate impact. You can request a meeting and a meeting date and location by checking the legislative session calendar online. Know that sometimes the members of Congress or elected officials are busy, and so you may be meeting with a staffer, but that's just as effective. And it may differ a little bit from state to state and location to location. But you can always find more information about the legislative session online. And another thing that you can do is, if you don't want to have an in-person meeting, just you and the elected official or you and the staff member, is you can seek out other organizations and advocacy groups that have Hill days or take people to the member of Congress's office and have meetings with multiple members of the community at a time. So that can be a really effective way to have an in-person meeting as well. So make sure that you're on time if you choose to do an in-person meeting. Also, don't request more time than necessary. You want to make sure that you're focused on your one specific ask. And usually you don't need more than 30 to 60 minutes to do this. And then always remain respectful regardless of your personal views on their partisan politics. So remember that you're there to ask for something specific, whether that's for them to vote a certain way or introduce a bill on an issue, and stay focused on your ask. And then always remember to follow up and say thank you, to thank them for meeting with you in person. Okay, so to recap, first, you need to identify your issue using your combination of passion, expertise, and experience, and sense of urgency. Then you need to identify the level of government and elected official you'd like to contact, so your state, local, or federal representatives. Then you need to develop your request, so do your research on the issue. Know, the 5 W's about your ask. Then choose the best way to contact them. What is doable for you? What do you have the time and capacity to do? So feel free to be creative, whether that's through a texting program, calling, emailing, letters. All of these are effective strategies. Then finally, take action and invite others to do the same. So especially with calling and letters, it's really effective to have other people call on your behalf as well, because these offices oftentimes are set up to track the number of calls and letters they receive on a specific issue. So if you can get your friends and family involved, it often puts more pressure on the elected official to really understand and engage your ask. So in order to find which representatives you want to contact, you can find them on the South Carolina Women in Leadership page. And you can also find them on the AIT's Action Center on our webpage, as well as some voter resources. And we're going to go into more depth on this in the next section as well. Okay, does anyone want to ask any questions or recap what they've learned?
I did have a question. This is Charmaine in Aiken. One of the points you made was that we would have the option of requesting a response when we write to, say, a senator or whomever. I'd like to know your thoughts on whether that's worth our time to request a response or not.
Sure. So I think it's great to request a response. That way you can make sure that the elected official has, engaged with the material that you've presented, and you can get any feedback that they might have, or, they can share their perspective on the issue as well, and you can figure out the best way to move forward.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I guess I do.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes,
can.
ma'am, we can.
Okay. And I'm thinking of the state level. I have tried to get in touch with many of my representatives and senators, and some of them are easy to get a face-to-face meeting with, and some of them are not. I find some of them, the secretary will say, I'll talk to Senator so-and-so and get back to you, and she never does. Is there an effective way to make them want to meet with you face-to-face?
One of the things that Elizabeth's going to talk with in her part of the presentation is a lot of the representatives have their cell phone numbers or their local business numbers listed. We do have that information for those that are published. And so that it may be helpful for you not to have to use the secretary as an intermediary. You may be able to contact them directly. And Elizabeth will talk a little bit more about that and point you in the right direction there. Good. Well, like I said, we have a very full agenda. Thank you so much. That was a ton of information, Erin, and we really appreciate you going through all of that for us. So I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth Stribling now so she can talk specifically about South Carolina and also a little bit about legislative redistricting, which is happening right now and is very important. We're going to have to live with the maps that are drawn for our districts for the next 10 years. And so we want to make sure that you feel empowered to speak out and let your representatives know that this is an important issue to you. So Elizabeth, please go ahead.
Hello, Sarah. Thank you so much, Erin. That was wonderful. And I have a couple things that are similar to what you said. And hopefully I can ignite some passion on the really exciting issue of redistricting. So today I want to talk about contacting your specific South Carolina representatives and on the issue of redistricting to start with as an example. So I'll do the redistricting stuff first, and then I'll tell you guys, like through my examples, how I've been able to pester and contact and respond and work with my specific representatives. Because you do have to be creative. To Ms. Denman's question, sometimes just the email and call isn't enough. And it is your right to get your voice heard. So it takes a little bit of persistence for sure. Okay. The screen isn't, give me 1 second, folks. I have to share this a different way. I'm not able to move. One second again. I'm used to these technical difficulties because I had to teach on Zoom for about a year. So let me try this again. Share screen. Is it moving for you guys at all? Is the screen moving?
It is not moving.
Okay.
Would you like me to try to share and see if I'm able to, let me pull it up as well.
I'm sorry, we're so crunched on time here.
No problem, we're getting through it.
All right, I'm going to try again, Sarah.
Okay.
Can you see it moving now? Thumbs up? Okay, see this moving? Everyone see me? Perfect. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so we're going to talk about the issue of redistricting in South Carolina. And as Erin said, you really need to be passionate when you're calling your representatives. And this is a super timely, really important issue that many people don't quite have the passion for because they might not really understand it. But it matters for the next 10 years of how we're able to vote and who we're able to vote for. So, and we have really high voter registration in South Carolina, but not a ton of turnout because there's this impression that your vote doesn't matter. And if we have unfair lines that sort of predetermine who's going to be elected, that's not a false claim to feel like your vote doesn't matter. So we really want widespread engagement and we want everybody to get passionate about this. So hopefully when you learn a little bit about it, you might want to try these steps for calling your representative on the issue of redistricting. So just sort of briefly, the Constitution requires that after every 10 years, we redraw our lines based on our population information. So you've heard a lot about the census. South Carolina has a 10.7 population growth. And while the nation is growing a ton, South Carolina's growth has been a little more interesting. So I hope you can look at the census data on your specific community and see how it's changing. So because the Constitution says one person, one vote, our representatives have to represent an equal number of people. So those lines have to shift when the state shifts. And then our state Senate and state House have their own redistricting committees, and they do the process in a little bit different ways. So the Senate had some 10 public hearings first to hear from the people what they thought about the previous maps and their criteria for drawing the maps. And the House is going to present some of their own maps and then have public hearings. So now's really the time to start thinking about contacting your representative about this issue because we're in the heat of it. We're in the thick of it. We're looking to late September, early October for when we have to step up and speak out about this issue if it matters to you. So I put losing your vote on here. That sounds maybe super dramatic, but again, you know, if your vote doesn't matter because the maps of your district are drawn in such a way that there's not much of a competition, it's almost like that power that the Constitution gives you is no longer there. So you'll see the little picture here. This is, if you're curious about the term gerrymander, in 1812, there was a Massachusetts senator, his name was Elbridge Gerry, so it could be pronounced gerrymander, and they do that in Massachusetts, who drew this little creature for his district in order to get elected. It was an incumbent protection situation. And so that's where the term gerrymander comes in. So sometimes you'll see these super wonky shapes. South Carolina, we don't have a salamander, but we have a puffin and an elephant and a swamp monster. This image here is from the Post and Courier. The title was something like, did a kindergartner draw your districts? And these are United States congressional districts. And so they do have some wonky shapes, and districts 1 and 6, those are both the green ones. There's some question about whether those are there to protect an incumbent, and whether that's true or not. I think what's important is to know who draws the maps, which are the elected officials. So there's definitely some conflict of interest. And so that's why it's really important that citizens provide the oversight. And when we contact our representatives, that's what we're doing. We're saying, we're watching you draw these maps. We saw where they were, we see the population, we see our communities and our needs. And so we're the ones who have to, in this moment, provide the oversight. Some states have independent commissions. South Carolina's Constitution does not allow for that. And other states also have the ability for you to create a ballot measure if you wanted an independent commission, but we also don't have that. So we are not stuck with, we are set on citizens having to speak up when they see a problem instead of relying on some outside source to sort of help us with this. This is our responsibility. So we do have some other weird shapes too in our House and Senate districts. Oops, went too fast, sorry. This one looks like a little chicken leg. And sometimes, this is near Columbia, sometimes the shapes don't necessarily indicate an unfair map because the criteria for drawing these maps are very complicated. And so I'm going to talk about that as what you can do when you contact your rep maybe it suggests a criteria. So just because it's weird doesn't necessarily mean that it's unfair. It just means we need to take a closer look and ask why. So I call this guy the stingray because his little tail there takes a piece of Elgin. And so, you know, people who live in Elgin and Kershaw County and Camden might look at that and just ask the question, why? So that's, you know, just making sure that you look at your maps and, as Aaron said, do your research if you're going to call about redistricting. So some factors that affect the criteria for district lines. So this is sort of where we can speak up and where we all come in as a community. There's some federal and state criteria in the Constitution, and those have to do with population. And then the 1965 Voting Rights Act. So this was just a landmark case because in the South, there was a habit of egregious racial gerrymandering during the Jim Crow era. So in 1965, the Voting Rights Act sought to protect those communities by something called preclearance, where the Southern states and many states who had a history of racial gerrymandering had to present their maps to the Department of Justice. And they had to present any kind of voting change to the Department of Justice as well, just to make sure those historical errors, voter suppression tactics were not used again. So, but in 2013, so pretty recently, this is our first redistricting process. In 2013, there was a Shelby versus North Carolina case where the preclearance is no longer, was found unconstitutional. The Supreme Court said that you can't have rules for some states. You can't have a federal rule for some states. It's like picking on the Southern states. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg dissented, famously saying, it's like saying you don't need an umbrella in a rainstorm because you're not getting wet. So in essence, she was saying preclearance works and it's working. So that's something that the map makers have to keep in mind, is the idea of a community of interest, which I'll talk about in just a second. So other folks want their county lines respected, their city lines respected, their geographical areas respected. If you live on the coast and your representative has the coast and the middle of, in the low country and other areas, then you might not feel like those concerns are being addressed. Contiguity and compactness are built into the federal and state constitution. And then incumbent protection. So drawing lines that protect the person who is in office is according to the House and Senate, is a valid sort of means or criteria for drawing those district lines. And the community of interest one is where we need the communities to sort of speak up. So here's where you come in. What criteria do you think matters the most? So if you're calling your representative and when you do that in September and October, thinking about what matters, is it county to you? Is it your community of interest? So a community of interest is a group of people who have a voting value that's the same. So it can't just be like, you know, me and my book club. It has to be like legislation relates to your community. So maybe there's a specific industry that's really big in your region. And so there's state laws that are restricting or monitoring your industry. Then you have an interest in getting a representative. It could be racial or cultural interests, or all those things where a law might affect your community. And then being curious about your specific maps, like zooming in, looking close. Why is this neighborhood broken up? Why is this cut through here? Who's included? Who's not included? When you're telling your redistricting story, I'm going to steal some of Aaron's great stuff and sort of just mold it to redistricting. One thing to do is to think about starting with the personal. Don't be afraid to use pathos, appeal to emotion, because it works. It's persuasive. So who are you? I live in the historic Clearview neighborhood. I'm a member of this church. My 2 daughters attend Stiles Point Elementary. What that does is demonstrate your value. So you start with the story of yourself and then connect that to the story of us, those of us on the coast, as Senator Sand's constituent, or the South Carolina, the United States Constitution guarantees that us can be our country too. So it's self to us, and then the story of now. This is going to matter for the next 10 years. They're making the decision soon, and here's why it matters to me. And then you can make an ask. as Erin said. So specific ask for redistricting might say, please consider making a statement about keeping intact my community of interest. So one with that one, you're not just saying, here's my community of interest, you're asking the representative to say, I'm going to try to keep you all together, or I'm going to stand up for you in this meeting. We might ask for transparency in map making. So we might say, when you get your maps, we need 2 weeks to look at them, or can we have them for 10 days and comment on them, or something like a specific way to have them be transparent. And then you can also make a general ask. Like, I think it's always great to appeal to their duty. And to appeal to the sense of patriotism and our togetherness as a country, like doing the right thing and doing the, not taking your power and using it in a way just to make sure that you stay in office, but it's your responsibility to be our voice. And they can't be our voice unless we tell them how we're thinking about a subject. So, story of self, story of us, and story of now. Erin talked about the different ways to communicate, and I wanted some experience and the ways that I've contacted representatives, picking up the phone, and even if you feel like you're not getting called back, and maybe Representative Whetmore can speak to this. In my research, I've read that even volume indicates a priority. So lots of phone calls, and if this is an issue you're passionate about, redistricting is an issue you're passionate about, maybe setting a schedule and calling every 10 days or so, or asking friends and neighbors to call, or have everyone over to call. So I would take down a few notes before you call to respect the staff members' time. And our representatives are part-time worker. They work for us part-time. They often have other jobs. They have kids and go to soccer like we do. They're super busy. We're busy, and it's your right to speak to them. But being patient and persistent, I think, would work. So if you don't hear from your rep directly, I think volume does matter in this situation. You're interrupting their day, and if they get a bunch of phone calls on the same issue, it's going to rise to the top as a priority. Writing a letter. So we've heard from our friends at the League of Women Voters that old school letter writing is effective. Somebody's got to sort through and open that mail. It's another sort of volume thing. And I think about the difference between getting something in the mail handwritten and an email that can be out of sight and out of mind. So we really encourage you to write your thoughts down, send it in snail mail, send a postcard, and also social media works. You can @ your reps on Twitter, and I've gotten direct messages on Facebook from reps before. I'll do all four. I'll call, send a letter, tweet, and then do the legislative email as well. They all have their different preferences, and once if you're like me, I like to get engaged in a lot of different topics. So now I know if I need to call this rep, what's her best way to get to her. So you can sort of, once you know what their preferences are, and I would try them all. So I'm going to gloss over this because Erin talked about it already, but I'll get specific about South Carolina. Who exactly are you calling? As you know, we have our 2 state senators and our House members, which is based on population. So you're going to contact these legislators for federal issues. So for example, with voting, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act just passed in the House. And if you read about it and you want to talk to your rep about that, because it's going to go to the Senate next, if you want them to vote for or against it, then it's Lindsey Graham and Tim Scott you're going to try to reach out to. Keeping in mind that they represent 5.1 million people. Like when you get to your state representatives, for example, a House member represents 41,000 South Carolinians. So just in terms of volume, I think, in my personal opinion, I think you're going to have a greater impact calling your state representatives more frequently. So, and here's our congressional map. So I'm in Charleston, South Carolina. So I'm District 1. I have Nancy Mace, and Clybourne is 6 and Rice is 7. So these are our representatives for the federal issues. So not that you could see all this. This looks like a big mess. I just wanted to show you the bureaucracy of South Carolina government. We have a judicial and executive and legislative branch. And we're going to talk about the House of Representative members and our Senate members. But, we have a Department of Education and Department of Juvenile Justice, and those go through our executive branch. So this is our Senate map. If we're talking about redistricting, you could see that we have 46 senators, and we also have 46 counties, but they can't be the same because of our equal protection clause. One person, one vote. So each of our districts has to be based on population. So it would be easy just to say make our districts are counties, but you know, Lee County has like 16,000 people and Charleston County has like almost 500,000. So it wouldn't be fair to have one rep for each of those counties. And here are house maps. You can see the little stingray in the middle there. So 124, and they represent about 41,000 South Carolinians. So there's so many different ways to find out who your reps are. South Carolina Women in Leadership has a legislative contact page that was shared earlier and we'll share again. And we're updating it now so it can have some of the home addresses. So when you go to write that postcard, it's going to be all nice and easy there for you. But if you don't even know who your rep is to start with, there's a bunch of different websites, but the South Carolina scstatehouse.gov. It looks like it's from like the first website ever created. It's very old looking, but it's super quick and easy to use. On the bottom, it says find your legislators, and you'll see, and I've zoomed it up there. I put my address in and it immediately populates with my United States senators and my representative and my state senator, Sandy Sen, and my state representative, Spencer Whetmore, who I'm so excited is here to talk with us. Look at all those women. Isn't that amazing? 3 out of 5 of my representatives are women. That's exciting for me. So when you click on the blue things, it's going to give you their contact page. So this is Senator Sen's, the map of her district's on there, her phone number. And when I first moved to my street, there were some pothole issues, and I was like doing some digging, and I called her and sent her a message. And I sent her a Facebook post, and she answered on the email one time. And then a few months later with something else, she answered on Facebook Messenger. So you really just have to try to be creative. And she answered me personally and gave me the exact information. So it was just a really good first experience with a local issue. I'd always called like the big numbers and the big names whenever I got like worked up about something, but these like the local issues and our local representatives need to hear our voices too about those things. So, and then my other representative is Ms. Whetmore here, and her contact page you'll see is a little bit different. She has her cell phone number. So I'll let her talk about what that's like getting a text from a random, because I'm sure that's happened because I did that once. So, and her address is on here as well too. And then last, before I end, I wanted to just highlight some things. If you want to learn more about redistricting, you got a crash course in a super quick amount of time, but we have a ton of resources on exploring your maps. If you want to testify, the House hearings are coming up, and we'd love for, if this matters to you and you look at your map and you notice something interesting, we'd love for you to really to be a part of that process as well. Because again, the people making the maps are those who are in office. And so it's up to us to be the eyes and ears for all the citizens and say, we're watching you in this process. And also the legislative contact information is on here. All right, I went so fast because I lost all that technology time. So if you have any questions, let me stop sharing here. I'm happy to answer them for you.
Sure, that was
Thank you
great,
so
Elizabeth.
much
That
for
was so much information.
I know it was too much. I'm sorry. All right, and then
Well, and just a reminder, you're going to get these presentations, so don't feel like you have to memorize any of it. All of the links will be live in the presentation. So Elizabeth, maybe if you want to introduce our special guest, and we can kind of launch right into sort of hearing the story about contacting from the other side of the coin.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. All right, so we are honored to have Spencer Whetmore here today. She's from District 115 in Charleston, South Carolina. She began her career in public service as a prosecutor for Charleston County Solicitor's Office, where she represents South Carolina in criminal cases. In 2014, she brought her legal background and experience in advocacy to the city of Folly Beach, where she served as a city administrator. She's a graduate of Princeton University and Vanderbilt Law School, and she lives on Folly Beach with her two daughters, and one husband. Spencer, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. So I'm going to move quickly too, because I do suspect that there may be some questions after we all wrap up. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is I want all of y'all to be successful. So I'm going to be brutally honest with you. And so I will tell you that the first thing I tell people is that all of your representatives from the federal down to the local are people. And I think it is so easy to forget that when you're passionate about an issue, it's so easy to reach out, and especially on Facebook or social media, you monster, I can't believe you supported this issue. How could you? You're killing our children, right? Like, we're all people. And I think that's the most important thing that I always lead with, is to say, look, especially so on your local level and your state level, state representatives are part-time. We receive a salary of about $10,000 a year. So I would say probably either we're retired or all of us have another primary job, right? So that's definitely the case. In South Carolina, we are in legislative session from January to May, and we are in Columbia Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. So those are the times that I am most engaged in terms of emails, phone messages. So I would say just remember that timing. The legislative session runs from January to May, and then anything in between after May is either going to be budget related, which we just saw in June. We've got the federal funding coming up, or of course this year we've got redistricting. So keep in mind, if you've got a legislative ask, pre-filing for those things there'll be a November date and a December date, but we won't be able to take anything up until January. So I'm also going to be throwing a lot of information at everyone here. I would say that it depends on whether or not, it depends on your issue as to the best strategy. First of all, from a local and state perspective, I would say that you're going to have a different strategy than you will on a federal issue. And there's two different types of issues at each of those levels. One is maybe an issue that's not super well known, or doesn't, people don't really have a lot of entrenched views. I'm trying to think of an example, like you're trying to push for a new park in your town, or something along those lines, where don't underestimate the power of like 4 or 5 people on a local issue that's not some hot button issue. We had a group of moms out on Folly, despite the city saying, oh, we can't change the speed limit, DOT, yada, yada, yada. We had 4 or 5 moms get out there and start holding signs. And lo and behold, we found a way, actually working with Senator Sen, to get a traffic study done and to lower the speed limit. So don't underestimate, especially on a local level, the power of maybe 5 people coming to a meeting, not on a hot button issue, but on like your day-to-day, like this is an idea I have, or this is something I want to get done. On the state level, I would say there's 2 different types of approaches. One is to come in as a problem solver, right? So you've got an issue, and again, this is going to be probably best on your issues that aren't super hot button, right? These are issues like probably not like abortion and guns, but more like, hey, did you know that there's a bill in the Judiciary Committee right now that I'm passionate about, having to do with voting safety, something along those lines. So the strategies for that are, one, remember I said at the beginning, we're human beings. And I think it is easy to forget that that we get defensive, and whether that's right or wrong, or we're elected not to get defensive, we do. And I probably less so than most people, but that's just a fact of reaching out to people. So when you come with criticism first, it's not going to be as productive of a conversation. It's just not. And so I would say that when you're coming as a problem solver, you're going to come and you're going to say, hey, thank you for your attention to this, or thank you, some kind of praise. Thank you for whatever it is that you like about the person, if you can find anything. You're going to come early, right? So early on in the issue, right? Once an issue is like gone through the committee process and it's on the House floor, we're basically voting up and down. I mean, you're not really going to get a lot of amendments in there at that point. So that's my next point, is to keep in mind that there's a committee process in the State House. A lot of local governments have the same sort of committee structure. So get to an issue early. Find out who's on the committee that's dealing with it. For example, I'm on the Judiciary Committee. That means that I handle things like criminal justice, like laws. We don't handle money. We don't handle business. We handle like laws. It's probably about half of the legislation that comes through. There's an education committee in the House. When Elizabeth had up the contact screens for the House and the Senate, you can see what committees they're on. Your state senators are going to be on multiple committees, and your state House members are on just one standing committee each. There are sometimes ad hoc committees that we'll serve on as well. So the best and most effective thing you can do is to come with a proposed strategy or solution. If you can't do that, come with unintended consequences, right? So so an example, let's see, we had a vulnerable adult bill, and I really liked the idea. It was in my subcommittee. We were going to do a registry for vulnerable adults. And I worked really hard with like several attorneys who do elder law, because I had been a prosecutor and I'd seen this happen. You know, I knew about the child abuse registry, right? So this is an example of an issue. It wasn't super partisan. It was just one that needed some hard work, right? And so, you know, worked with a lot of people on it. Well, you know, towards the end, we realized there might be an unintended consequence of family caregivers, right? So we were able to write that part out of the bill to make it a better bill, right? So again, it's always trying to make sure that you're coming with a solution, or if not a solution, not just straight criticism, but maybe like, hey, I know your intent is to do X, but keep in mind that may also impact this other thing that you didn't mean to cause a problem with. I can't echo enough what everybody has said from the All In folks. You know, specific targeted asks are so important. In terms of so the other types of issues are these like hot button issues. And I'll tell you, those are hard. They're just hard. Often those are entrenched, they're partisan. You know, people are catching a lot of pressure from, so I'm a Democrat, I know this is a nonpartisan, but I will tell you, you know, your caucus that can be a really big deal. Hey, you know, we've supported you. This is an issue you need to be on. All governing is compromising, right? So, you know, maybe something that particular elected official, like it wouldn't have been their first choice, but given an up or down vote, like, you know, we compromise and we build relationships. And so these big entrenched issues are hard. And people often ask me like what the best and most effective thing is for them. And I would say that it is helping an elected official to feel the heat. And what that means is that it's got to come from a constituent who would probably already vote for that person. And it's got to be a volume thing. So having 1 million people from a million people outside of my district contact me passionately on an issue really doesn't mean that much to me, because they're not voting for me. Likewise, having a bunch of people come to me and say, I didn't vote for you. I worked really hard not to get you elected. And I disagree with you on this. Well, okay. I mean, like, I want to represent everybody, but I also told you guys I was going to be honest with y'all. And so I will tell you, as much as it's important to me to represent all of my constituents, the most effective strategy for changing or at least, you know, affecting some ability to consider both sides of an issue on a hot button issue is to say, hey, I'm your constituent. I vote. And I I voted for you, or I would like to vote for you, but I need you to support this issue. And I have 100 similarly situated friends. So that's sort of the best advice I can give on those hot button issues. A lot of times people will send these like form emails to all state house reps. Honestly, don't like we get hundreds of them a day. Most people have their legislative aides go through and remove things that aren't from constituents. So spend your time focused and building relationships with your representatives. That's the best thing you can do. Okay, so in terms of what we prioritize, this is just completely echoing everything that Erin said and Elizabeth said, that we prioritize hearing from constituents, individual feedback, right? So those one-click politics form letters can be important if there's a ton of volume and I start seeing names that I recognize. But for the most part, that you're right on the money. An impactful story, how this is going to affect your community, like an individual outreach is really important. The meeting thing, you know, I've only been elected recently. I haven't taken any meetings because of COVID. And frankly, you know, I go back and forth from Columbia every day. I come home every night. I've got young kids at home. So I don't take a lot of meetings in general. In general, I've got 2 hours in the car in the morning and 2 hours in the car in the afternoon. And so what I do is I say, hey, can we have a phone call about this issue at 3:30 this afternoon? Everyone is different though. That is so correct. There are some people that, you know, live close to Columbia and may take meetings all the time. You know, keep in mind though, it is January to May. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday that we're up there. Let's see. So one thing that I think does get overlooked sometimes is the ability to come and speak at subcommittee and committee hearings. Right now, a lot of those are on Zoom. And so you can speak in front of the committee. And sometimes when you have a really powerful story to tell, it may not matter if you're my constituent or not, right? Like if we have so I'll just use the transgender sports bill. It was a big hot button issue, but it was also one that people were unfamiliar with. So hearing from students and hearing from kids, hearing from doctors mattered. And so I would say that, don't definitely be aligning yourself with advocacy organizations that can help you figure out when those public hearings are going to be. But I will say they're all on the website for those of you who are, good at sort of going through something, right? If you can find it by either clicking on the bill and looking at its history of, what committee it's in and those committee hearings, or there's a meeting schedule online under the House and the Senate tabs. So the easiest way though is to find an organization that's already working on the issue and sort of let them guide you, but don't underestimate the power of speaking at those sort of, especially at the subcommittee level. Let's see. So sometimes if you're just looking for information, you can also go to staff members, right? So every committee has staff. This is particularly helpful, especially on things like a budget question. Hey, did we fund X, Y, and Z? I might not know, but certainly somebody in the Ways and Means staff does. Same thing with redistricting, reaching out to your judiciary staff members. Hey, I will say on the redistricting issue, there is a website, both the Senate and the House have all their stuff published. They even have the House members' maps and geographical stats published under their redistricting tab. So there's a wealth of information, but that's a really complicated issue. And again, I'd really encourage you to align yourself with a group that's working on it. League of Women Voters, probably Women in Leadership, but I definitely would say align yourself with groups that are working on that, because it's really complicated stuff. Like we still have Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, but not Section 5. It's complicated stuff for sure. Let's see. So I talked about the power of, coalitions and advocacy groups, talking to staff. There was a question earlier about requesting a response. And I think my answer on that would be, at the federal level, you are almost certainly going to receive a form letter. It will probably say something like, thank you so much for contacting Senator so-and-so. We've received your input. And then it will be an explanation probably of why they voted the way they did. It will probably come after the fact. So just know that on a federal level. I think Elizabeth correctly pointed out that 5.1 million people is a lot. And so it will almost certainly be a form letter. On the state level, keep in mind that we're just, it's really just us, right? So on the House, there are 4 of us that share a part-time legislative aide. There's no staff answering these things. So request, you may or may not get the option for a response. And on the Senate level, the senators do have a little bit more staff than we do. Often, 1 or 2 people sharing an aide. And then they have more committee staff as well. On the local level, almost certainly the elected official is not going to have a staff, but of course there's a local government, city administrator, zoning director, whatever your issue is. So let's see what else. I've got my notes here. The most important thing to remember is that we all have ADD, not because we have some diagnosed condition, but because we are literally, the volume of information that we are trying to juggle in addition to our jobs and our personal lives is unbelievable. So unless an issue is right in front of me, I'm unlikely to remember that I told you I would help you on something. So don't be afraid to follow up, especially if you've got a legislator who seemed friendly on your issue and you're like, well, why haven't they done anything yet? Honestly, we probably just forgot. I probably have 30 flagged emails right now of things I'm supposed to be doing, and I just haven't had a chance to do them yet. So don't be afraid to follow back up. Don't be afraid to bring along an advocacy organization with you when you follow back up, right? It's one thing to hear from X constituent, and it's quite another to say, hey, Moms Demand Action is calling. And so don't be afraid to bring along an advocacy organization. Let's see, part-time, no staff, we're people, come as a problem solver, and remember that constituents are the most effective voices. So any questions? I know we're over time though, so I'll defer to Sarah and Elizabeth on that.
No, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. And we really appreciate your honesty and frankness also. I mean, I think that, saying what the real story is a whole lot more helpful than, the sort of talking points that everyone thinks that they should use. So this is great. Well, we are a little bit over, but I think that it's been well worth it. And I want to give people an opportunity to ask any questions that they may have. Again, you will get slides with all of the links and resources. South Carolina Women in Leadership is working on redistricting. Elizabeth is spending almost all of her time on it right now because it is such an important issue. So there'll be links with all sorts of information, both background information about redistricting, maps. We have a couple of different pages with replays of the Senate public hearings that have already happened, dates and information for the upcoming House hearings. So please, take a look and dig into all of that information. But are there any questions that anybody would like to ask? Excellent. Well, we are so pleased that you joined us today. Spencer, thank you so much for taking time out of your already busy schedule to share this information with us. We'll get that follow-up email out to everyone. Thank you again to AIT. What a great partner, and we so appreciate their perspective on all of the national issues and all that they do around civic engagement and education. Elizabeth, fantastic information about South Carolina specifics and about redistricting. So contact information for the presenters will also be in the email if you want to follow up with any of them directly on any questions that you may think of after the fact. If there's anything that we can do to help you, we have just a general event email that you can use as well. So thank you, Erin. Thank you, Guadalupe. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Spencer. Thank you all for joining us. And please, as we mentioned, we are doing a lot on redistricting. We are sending out voter alerts. So follow us on social media. We are at SC Women Lead on all of the platforms. So we're pretty easy to find. And we encourage you to keep your eyes peeled for information that we put out there about redistricting, but about other issues for women in leadership and other trainings like these. And we encourage people to, get involved in their local appointed boards and commissions. So you can get all the info you need there on a regular basis if you follow us. Thank you again. Everyone have a great afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. It was our pleasure. Take care, everyone. Have a great day.